This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. You know, when you think about the Cleveland Browns, you really have to chop them up into two distinct eras since 2020. There is the first era of that first core of the roster from 2020 to about, I think it's fair to say 2024 is when the dream died of everything that surrounded 2020 in a weird way. And of those 4 seasons of the Cleveland Browns, they had 2 playoff years, 2 11-win seasons out those 4. It's not a tremendous track record, but it is a neutral track record, right? Which is better than what the Browns have been doing since before 2020, right? As much as people try to make it seem like this is the worst era ever for the Cleveland Browns. Again, I'll state it like I've stated it many times. The Browns have gone to the playoffs 2 times in the last, 5 years or 6 seasons. That is the most frequent amount that the Browns have been to the playoffs or had 11-win seasons I've ever seen in my lifetime, right? Not to say that that should be a measure for permanent employment or to put somebody in the Hall of Fame, but it is to keep perspective on what the Browns have been and what they've been trying to climb out of. Which brings me to this second era, right? The 2025, and it'll be judged 2025, 25, 26, 27, 28, right? How is this next pivot going, the rebuild going with Andrew Berry? Well, if you listen to ESPN, they just ranked all 32 teams by their players that are 25 and younger. And the Cleveland Browns, according to ESPN, are a top 5 team in the NFL in this specific ranking. Now, this is very encouraging. This is very exciting, but we're going to dig into why the Browns are ranked this high, the criteria that went into it, and how excited we should be going forward to be making a list like this at this current point of their rebuild. We're going to jump into all of that, but first I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 sports pick app. The app is really easy to use. For player picks, just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. That's it. Rather just pick teams, PrizePicks has that now too. Just pick the winner, spread, or total in any game or fight. PrizePicks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Plus, you can even follow me on the app at Quen_C. Tell my picks, one click, and follow your friends too. Best of all, play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. Just use the promo code HMA when you sign up. That's right. PrizePicks just switched up their offer, so there's no better time to join. Lock in and win with that first lineup. That's code HMA at sign up to get $150 in bonus lineups if you win with your first $5 or up lineup. All right, so this is the list right here. We're going to go through the methodology that they use to develop this list. So they say here they've created these list in previous years, the number of starts made by a player 25 years old or under matters, the number of snaps right there that a player under 25 years old, it matters a ton. These 2 factors here are going to put the Browns in a pretty good spot, right? For last year. Remember, it's a very young football team. I imagine that it's going to continue to keep the Browns at a pretty high spot even through next year, given that they're probably going to play a lot of young players next year as well. The quality of play by players under 25, age adjusted to capture the fact that a 21-year-old of X ability will likely improve more than a 23-year-old of X ability, and with extra consideration given to Pro Bowl or All-Pro selections. Value and length of player contracts, relative importance of positions, with quarterbacks being more important, running backs, off-ball linebackers, specialists being less important than other positions. I really don't love heavily weighting it, but if it's just slightly weighted, I think that's fine. Draft value, a 2026 draft, particularly in the first 3 rounds. Expected key starters reserved under 25 for teams in 2026, and specific significant injuries or suspensions that will affect 2026 availability of players under 2020 not 20, 25 years old, 25 years old. So that's the criteria that they're using to judge this list. If their criteria has told them that the number one team, I think, for them is the New England Patriots, or this is a team that ranked number 7 last year, number 1 this year. Their blue chips are Will Campbell, Christian Gonzalez, and Drake May, with Craig Woodson graduating out of this classification. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the Patriots being number 1 here as far as like a 25 and under team. Like, I understand that the Patriots are a very good football team, but, Drake May, big questions about his production in the playoffs. I think he'll get better, obviously, and I think he will be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. But and Christian Gonzalez is already one of the better DBs in the NFL. There's real questions about what Will Campbell is going to be in the league, because it really didn't go well for him at tackle last year, especially once guys got used to him. It's especially concerning for me for Will Campbell that the trajectory for him went that he was better at the beginning of the year than he was at the end of the year. Right. Usually for an offensive lineman, you can live with the trajectory in the rookie year being, they struggled a little bit to start and then they figured it out at the end because, you're getting weight, you're trying to figure out how to be stronger, you're figuring things out. Okay, if you're better at the end, that's a better trajectory for me. But if you're struggling at the end versus where you started, that makes me concerned that you got figured out in a way that you couldn't figure out how to stop. We've seen this with Jed Wills, where he had that reverse trajectory where he was fine early and then later on he started to kind of fall off. That's my concern there with Will Campbell. Ultimately, I don't know, Christian Gonzalez, Drake May, it's a big take there, but outside of those two, I don't know if there's enough there to justify the Patriots being number 1 on this list. I like Travion Henderson, but I don't know. I feel like it's a bit high for the Patriots. But let's look at the Texans. The Texans, I think they do pretty much belong here. Arante Essery, Will Anderson, Kamari Lassiter, CJ Stroud. The big question is CJ Stroud at this point. It's kind of crazy to say that given how good CJ Stroud was. But again, it's that troubling trajectory with CJ, right? If a guy, Caleb Williams struggled his first year, even though he wasn't as bad as everybody thinks he was, but there's a struggle early on. He figures it out. He keeps going up. With CJ Stroud, there's an upward trajectory, a plateau, and then a dip. That's concerning, right? Because once you start dipping, it's not guaranteed that you come back. So CJ Stroud's really the one that's going to flip this because the players that they got around him are pretty solid. They got Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Keelan Rutledge in the draft. Really like their draft class. It's just a question of hey, who's CJ Stroud going to be by the end of the year? Is he going to be back to the MVP candidate that people thought he was going to be early in his career? Or does he continue to struggle and this is somebody that you're arguing about whether you want to give him money or not by the end of the season? The Bears are number 3. Again, quarterbacks are going to weight this list heavily, which I think makes the Browns placement even more impressive because quarterback's not a big factor of where the Browns rank here. But they got the Bears 3 here. Colston Loveland, Roma Doomsday, and then I think this is heavily carried by Caleb Williams right here. I mean, not to say that Colston Loveland's not great or Roma Doomsday hasn't shown potential, but Caleb Williams is the main reason why they're here. Luther Burden, I think, is another one. He was pretty impressive last year as well. I think Ozzie Tripulo, somebody that they like, the left tackle. So, yeah, I get the Bears being here at number 3. I think that makes sense. And then number 4 here is the Cleveland Browns. Now, the fascinating part of this, right, when we look at the first 3 lists, quarterback, Drake May, number 1. Quarterback, CJ Stroud, number 2. Quarterback, Caleb Williams, number 3. You look at the blue chips on the Browns roster, it's not a single quarterback there. Now, obviously, we wish that would be the case, that there was a quarterback there and that we felt great about a quarterback who was under 25, and that we were on our way to greener pastures, right? But that's not the case. But what I do think this says is that this class is just so strong. The young under 25 talent is so deep that despite not having that hallmark, 25 or under quarterback, we're still able to keep pace with these teams that are in the top 5 with quarterbacks. If you look around the Cleveland Browns on this list, you're going to see what? Tennessee, quarterback. Raiders, quarterback. Jets, no quarterback. Seahawks, no quarterback, right? Like, they're the only team in this top 6 conversation that's able to be here without quarterbacks. And also, Jared Verse graduated out of this category this year, right? Which would have been a big factor in their ranking on this list. They could have ranked higher if Jared Verse was a few months younger. So let's read what they have to say here about the Cleveland Browns. Let me pull it up here. All right. So last year, the Browns ranked 29th in this category. Now they rank 4th, and that's 4th without a quarterback. I think that's even more impressive. The blue chips listed here are Harold Fannin, Spencer Fano, Mason Graham, and Carson Schlesinger. Keep in mind, these are the players that the Browns have spent blue chip resources on. Honestly, this list could be even further if we're talking about guys in the first 3 rounds, because this doesn't include Emmanuel McNair-Warren, Denzel Boston. It doesn't include KC Concepcion. You know what I mean? Quincy Judkins is somehow not in the blue chip list. Like, it's nuts, right? Like, the amount of players that they only have 4 names that could fit on there. And it's like hard to take any of those names off, but I could name you 5 more names. So yes, the most important young talent team can have is a young quarterback, but we're not giving the Browns much credit for their 2 young quarterbacks in Shador, who is 24, who struggled last year with an 18.9 total QBR, and Gabriel, who's already aged off this list, which is incredible to think about. However, the Browns have added a ton of other young stars in the other past 2 drafts, enough to move from 29th a year ago to 4th. Some of y'all don't like Andrew Berry, and I get it. He's been polarizing. He's made some polarizing decisions. But if he nails these next 2 draft classes, guess what? You're stuck with him. like if these 2 draft classes are as good as it looks like they're going to be, and God forbid we get a quarterback on top of that, I'm sorry, you're stuck with Andrew Berry. It's what's better for the team, right? The fact that this 2025 class was good enough for the Browns to go from 29th on this list to 4th, despite the fact that no quarterback stood out, and every other team in the top 6 drafted a quarterback early, speaks volumes. But let's continue, right? Let's start with the offense, where talent is really, really young. Fannin far outplayed what we usually see from a rookie tight end: 72 passes, 731 yards when he just turned 22. Quincy Judkins is also 22. His backup, Dylan Sampson, is 21. I think that both of those guys are going to have massive jumps in efficiency. Dylan Sampson's particularly going to have a massive jump in production, in my opinion. The Browns drafted 2 wide receivers this year: KC Concepcion at 21, Denzel Boston at 22. And this year's number 9 pick, Fano, doesn't turn 22 until November. And look, I've lived through other eras of the Browns where we're drafting a ton of young talent. I do think this era is very different because, one, the returns we're seeing, the early returns are far more prominent for this draft class, 2025, than I've ever seen before, right? And there seems to be a lot of hope that 2026 is going to be that same way. And the volume of talent is much different, right? So yeah, the Browns have had young talent before, but I've never seen them have the young talent with the continuity in the front office that we've had, with the amount of direction that the Browns have as an organization, which I think is more than what they've had in the past. Not to say it's a ton of direction, But there is at least a direction there, which I can't say that's the case for other Browns teams that I've lived through. On defense, we start with Defensive Rookie of the Year, Carson Schlesinger, who turned 23. Graham, who's last year's first-round pick, is 23. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at 22. And veteran safety Ronnie Hickman, who is still just 24 after 3 seasons in the NFL. I would throw in Mike Hall as somebody who could potentially factor in to that conversation. He's only 23 years old as well, so he'd be on this list for 2 more years if he has a good year. So, I would throw him in there as somebody who could surprise you and add to that defensive talent. So that's where ESPN has the Cleveland Browns ranked as far as young talent goes. We are 4th out of 32 NFL teams of players 25 and younger. How much should this mean? I think it means a great deal. I know people's first reaction when they hear any kind of positive coverage of the Cleveland Browns is, okay, how can I make this negative, right? And a lot of people will jump to, yeah, it doesn't matter if we have this young talent. If we don't figure out quarterback, it's not going to matter. But I would pose this question. Do you not think having the young talent will make it easier to get a quarterback or to develop a quarterback? Because that is the philosophy that I am hoping for this Browns team. Yeah, they have a lot of young talent, and unfortunately right now that talent isn't at quarterback. But if we have a great offensive line that's young, if we have a great wide receiving core that's young and some tight ends that are young, right? Joe Royer might throw himself into a conversation here. I think he's better than people think. If they have a great defense that's young, then that makes the Browns a much better breeding ground for quarterback than they've ever been. And if they develop a quarterback because they have the right circumstances around them, then problem solved, right? So don't just think that this is, it's either we have a quarterback or we have nothing. This is the stuff that makes it easier to develop a quarterback. If you want a Bo Nix, well, you got to develop what they had around Bo Nix, right? Everybody loves to talk about Tom Brady. Tom Brady wasn't on sorry teams when he started, right? He had players around him, good players around him. He had the right environment to thrive and develop. Patrick Mahomes had the same thing, right? Yeah, it's the easiest way to get a quarterback. The most straightforward way to get a quarterback is to get one with a top 3 pick. That is the tried and tested formula, right? Get a top 5 pick, draft the quarterback. But if you can't get a top 5 pick, the second best thing you can be is a team that has developed and is ripe for a quarterback to step in and find success with. Everybody wonders, how does Green Bay continue to get quarterback after quarterback? It doesn't make sense. They go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. Well, it's because, one, they have continuity in Green Bay, and 2, they're never putting their quarterbacks in shit situations. Brett Favre wasn't put in a garbage situation when he was acquired from the Falcons, right? Aaron Rodgers wasn't put in a garbage situation when he took over for Brett Favre. And when Jordan Love took over for Aaron Rodgers, he wasn't put in a garbage situation. He was put in situations where success was possible with the talent that they had. Obviously, it takes some luck. You got to scout the right people. You got to find the right people who could play the position. But once you do that, you also got to put those players in a position to be successful. Right? Can't just make it happen with anybody. But if you get the right opportunity, you can make it happen with somebody. Hope that makes sense. So the Browns ranking high on this list, despite not having a quarterback, encouraging. It's super encouraging. And hopefully they can make even more of this as they go forward. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.